Hello and welcome to the Nature Hotline series, where each month we take questions asked to us by viewers just like you and answer them to the best of our abilities using our knowledge and network. Without further ado, let's discuss red-nosed reindeer, freezing frogs, and the extinction of mammoth proportions.
I think I found an injured animal. What do I do?
How do I get involved in ecology?
What type of plant is this?
How do I identify poison ivy?
Which plants are native?
I found a snake. Is it venomous?
So question 1 comes to us from Isaac. And Isaac asks, do reindeer really have red noses? Well, the answer to this question seems like an obvious no when you look at the facial structure of reindeer. At first glance, this seems like nothing more than a song that's sung around the holidays. However, you may be surprised to find that there is some truth behind the tale of Rudolph, but it's a lot more scientific than magic flying reindeer. In fact, the truth lies not within the reindeer themselves, but within a poisonous mushroom. Amanita are a genus of mushroom that have psychoactive properties. This means that when a reindeer consumes one of these mushrooms, they begin to behave in bizarre and abnormal ways. Head twitching, loss of body control, and the making of strange noises are all side effects from reindeer consuming these mushrooms. Now, these effects are of course temporary on the reindeer, so much so that they actually seem to enjoy them enough that they actively seek out these mushrooms for consumption. Although reindeer can digest the mushrooms, they can be quite harmful if eaten by humans. So, where do the red noses themselves come in? Well, the mushrooms themselves are actually a bright red color, and the red-nosed reindeer is a reference to the love that these animals have for this type of mushroom. Our next question comes to us from Alyssa, and Alyssa asks, whatever happened to woolly mammoths? Well, great question. However, this isn't really a question that I can answer so simply. Humans lived at the same time as mammoths, sure, but it was long before we kept any real records of climate, animals, or even our own human behavior. Luckily, the Earth does keep track of most things in something known as the fossil record. The fossil record is all the ancient remains and geologic differences throughout time preserved in rock. By studying different bits and pieces from plants, animals, and rock types, we can get quite a lot of information about the history of the Earth. If we focus on one specific time frame, we can even get a lot of information about a single species, like woolly mammoths, for example. Don't worry, I hear you. You want to get a closer look at these fossils. Well, here you go. If you look closely, you can see all the different remains of sea life that lie preserved within this rock. Now, there's tons and tons of research written on what was happening during the time of the woolly mammoth, from millions of years ago until just 4,000 years ago when they finally went extinct. Scientists have long believed that the cause of extinction for mammoths was human activity. For thousands of years, ancient humans would hunt mammoth for food and would even use the bones and hide to make shelters to survive during the time period of the Pleistocene, also known as the Ice Age. However, new studies are now indicating that there was a much greater threat to the woolly mammoth that eventually caused their demise. This threat was climate and habitat change, a now human-driven problem that is still the leading cause of extinction today. During this Pleistocene ice age, the Earth was significantly cooler, allowing for the formation of massive glaciers that kept much of the Earth's freshwater frozen in time. However, with global temperatures increasing during the end of this period, much of these glaciers began to melt away. I'm gonna have to clean that up. Over thousands of years, so much ice would melt that it would form creeks, rivers, ponds, wetlands, and many other new forms of very wet habitat, including increased precipitation. Most of the plants during this time were used to long periods of cold with relatively dry conditions because most of the water was originally frozen. However, with the ice melted, these plants were exposed to significantly more wet conditions. This caused a massive die-off of much of the plants mammoths would eat. Without a regular source of food, mammoth numbers quickly dropped, ultimately causing their extinction as the Earth created a habitat that could no longer support these massive Ice Age herbivores. Those climate changes happened well before the Industrial Revolution, which means that the warming global climate occurred naturally during this time period. This change happened so fast that the animals were simply not able to adapt quickly enough to survive. This led to a very quick extinction for the woolly mammoth. Unfortunately, today, climate change is even more significant and quick, and this time, we can blame it on humans. Naturally, climate change typically takes thousands or even millions of years. With humans, however, we see these changes take place within just 100 years or less. So if natural climate change can have such massive impacts on one of the largest land animals to ever walk the planet, imagine what human-made impacts will have on the animals we live alongside today. Something to think about. Our last question comes to us from Kaylee. And Kaylee asks, why don't animals freeze in the winter? Well, great question. Different animals have different methods to survive the cold. Mammals, for example, grow thick fur that keeps them warm. Birds often migrate to warmer climate, and insects will dig into wood or soil to avoid freezing solid. But what about amphibians? Now, in previous episodes, we've talked about how reptiles have different ways to escape the winter cold. However, amphibians require moisture to breathe and survive, so staying alive in a place where all the water is frozen is quite the task. Many amphibians will simply go into a dormant state where they get all the oxygen they need from the water, where they remain below the ice. Toads and land frogs, however, will dig into the ground or leaf litter to prevent themselves from freezing over winter. Now, there are actually many different ways to avoid freezing solid and dying. Ugh! And amphibians have figured pretty much all of them out. In fact, believe it or not, amphibians have even figured out a way to survive the winter, even if that means freezing themselves solid. Enter the wood frog. These frogs look pretty normal in terms of frog anatomy. However, these special animals have an incredible superpower that allows them to expose their bodies directly to extremely cold temperatures and then thaw in the spring without any issue. Wood frogs have developed a very clever way to survive a full body freeze. But first, we probably need to understand why freezing solid is so deadly to almost every other form of life on the planet. Of course, most forms of life are made up of water. Water freezes at a relatively high temperature, and that means that without warmth, the water inside an animal's body will freeze pretty quickly. This freezing process causes water inside the system to crystallize, which usually destroys cells. Now, once this water freezes and these cells are destroyed, they effectively die. This means blood, tissue, and even brain matter usually die when they are frozen. However, the wood frog has evolved a very unique way to combat these cell-destroying freezes. Special proteins inside the frog's body allow the water to freeze separately from the cells. Without water, cells typically collapse, but the wood frog's body substitutes water with a natural sugar that helps hold the cells together and prevents them from decaying. Altogether, this incredible method of survival means that the frog can freeze completely solid with no breathing, blood pumping, or even brain activity until it's thawed out. The melted water is then reabsorbed by the cells and used to restart the frog. Talk about a crazy way to survive the cold. Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Nature Hotline. Be sure to comment or email us questions for future videos. We might not put every question in a video, but we do take the time to make sure every question gets a response, so don't be afraid to ask. Remember, keep asking questions, keep learning, and of course, stay smart. See ya!